Hey, what is going on YouTube? Aaron here. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Update Day, and more importantly, Happy Memorial Day. Never forget. But in today's video, we are in the D7 provinciën here, the newest campaign to come to World of Warships Legends. And with it, a new class of ships entirely. The Dutch cruisers are now in the game with their unique trait of their Airstrike mode. And I know what we saw on the trailer, them doing 20,000+ damage, setting fires, and guys, unless you're going against AI or AFK players, don't expect to get that in many games. I've gotten a few decent strikes, however, you do truly have to catch probably a battleship or a heavy cruiser kind of sitting in one spot, and then follow it up with a few salvos of HE and or another airstrike in order to get a true heavy amount of damage. Now, we do manage a decent few of these airstrikes in this game. As you can see, there's actually an enemy division of provincians in this game that we're just kind of randomly dropping there at the start. It's a decent strategy. However, I don't think you're going to hit too much. But with that comes the anti-aircraft consumable. I've noticed a lot of carriers in games this morning, and I think they're going to be a lot more, you will see them a lot more because Wargaming made them basically just damage farming machines. So great job in that one, Wargaming. We definitely don't want the team mechanics, we just want the damage farming abilities. But regardless of Wargaming's poor decisions, stats and commander guide at the end of the video. And as you can see here, we are actually using that airstrike view. Make sure you press left trigger or L2 if you're on PlayStation to get that extended view. I did not know that for my first game, and I was like, why is aiming so difficult? But yeah, make sure you press Y to switch to the airstrike mode, and then you press L to zoom in to get a better view. And here is an example of that attack. Our very first bomb drop, a huge swing and a miss. As you can see, he is slowing down, and with the long time to target, you are going to have a tough time hitting, like we mentioned, anything except for AI and or battleships sailing in a straight line or stationary ships. But we do actually get a few hits here, or one overpen for a staggering, yes, 0 damage. So unless, like I mentioned earlier, you can get a massive strike on somebody sailing in a straight line and then follow it up with a few salvos of HE, this ship is nothing more than a gimmick. Now, before everyone heads to the comments and types in, "Oh, you suck, skill issue," I think this is one of those ships that I will play tomorrow and enjoy a lot more. The gameplay today has just been utter trash. So I think it's going to be a ship that once everyone kind of gets, out of update day or update week here, I will enjoy a lot more. One of those ships like the Flander, which initially was not so great, but then upon revisiting it, you throw a few different builds on there, she can be a lot of fun. Now, that does not mean you can't be influential in this ship. It does have some decent guns. However, if you're playing this thing solely for the guns, you are certainly handicapping yourself. She does have a decent armor profile, meaning she's just basically a super light cruiser, and you get overpenned with most battleships. I have gotten yeeted once. However, in most circumstances, even angled, it seems like they're just pens or overpens. So a decent little light cruiser with a fun gimmick is certainly a ship I would recommend getting the campaign for. Please do not buy out this campaign. It is definitely not worth your time to buy it out. A good meme build or division idea would be to put 2 of these things in a division with a carrier and just kind of rush your side, get up close to an island with some carrier cover, and just abuse the enemy CV with your AA, as well as dropping whatever you can with your airstrikes and lobbing with HE. That could be a lot of fun. But as it stands right now, and as it is in this game, especially for solo play, you are heavily reliant on your team fulfilling their role and not potatoing, and as it is World of Warships Legends and Update Day, that did not happen too much this morning and made my experience kind of miserable. But here is a good example of that bomb drop on a stationary target. We get a few salvos off on that Rochester in his smoke there, and we do actually catch him on a fire. But as you can see, we were going into a triple AA division. Only 2 or 3 of those planes actually made it. However, we did connect 3 bombs for a total of 6,000 damage and a good chunk off of his health. So like I mentioned, when you catch a stationary target, you can give them a decent chunk. However, how often are you going to catch a cruiser like that at 12 kilometers, which is your max range for these airstrikes? As always, it comes down to the man or woman in the box, aka the pilot or commander of your ship. So if you can get this thing in a good spot with some terrible enemy teammates, some good RNG, and a team that won't collapse immediately, then you may, quote-unquote, have some fun or find this ship to be good. However, in the meantime, I'm going to stick with my initial assessments that this thing is nothing more than a gimmick. Maybe if they made the airstrikes quicker time to target, but as it stands, and as you will see on this drop here, any ship that is slightly maneuvering or 2-speed, unless it's a battleship sailing in a straight line, you're going to miss pretty bad.
Motorversterking gedeactiveerd.
Now, I don't necessarily see this as a bad thing. However, if I'm trading in a decent chunk of utility in terms of radar, health, better guns, torpedoes for this airstrike, I'm going to want someone to either be AFK or sail in a straight line for me. You're going to have a tough time, quote-unquote, winning. However, that is not all of the game. Part of the game is having fun, and this is a new, fun experience. So go out, give it a try. If you decide to get the campaign, like I mentioned earlier, I would definitely not recommend buying this thing out day one. It is not going to be anything game-breaking anytime soon unless, you know, Wargaming disables movement. So, just my thoughts, just my opinions. We're at a meager 31,000 damage here, but as you can see, our team is losing position. And here is just a... You're trying to get a bullseye on a moving target there, trying to hit a destroyer at range like that who is moving. But in the case when you got it, use it when you got it, and maybe you will get lucky. Here is the point of the game where I kind of farm most of my damage and XP. You can see our team has done nothing to push on that right flank. And we did defend as best we could, but going against 4 or 5 ships there in a ship with only 33,000 health is just not going to work a majority of the time, especially when we're being potentially permanently spotted by that destroyer.
Brandalarm!
Something to note, even if our carrier was alive, he would not have been able to spot the destroyer regardless. The changes to the air detection mechanic now allow ships to only be spotted to the carrier and visible on the minimap. It is good for surface ships who are trying to get into position. However, it just kind of, like I mentioned earlier, removes that team-oriented mechanic from the game. Carriers now have really no obligation to go after destroyers unless they just want an easy, quick kill, and they're just going to sit and farm battleships. And speaking of destroyers, right on cue, the Akatsuki actually repositioned. It was smart on him, and he torpedoed that Edinburgh, who was just blindly pushing in. If you actually look at the scoreboard and our position, if we would have simply just held B and C here and kind of set up a little crossfire, especially with my airstrike, we could have potentially won this game. But here's a good example of that airstrike. This Veneto turns just a little bit, and he's still sailing kind of straight here. And yeah, 2 hits and a fire. So like I mentioned, unless they sail in a completely straight line, the time to target 13, 14 seconds is simply just not going to allow any massive hits. But here's a good example of the damage potential you could have. That Veneto was set on fire, so we're going to go ahead and use a little bit of the HE until we get a permanent fire. You don't really have the best fire chance, however, a 5-second reload as we get kind of a side drop here. And yeah, another 1 hit, and there is the permanent fire. So we're going to go ahead and switch to the AP. And both shell types, honestly, I wouldn't even recommend the AP unless you just you're really close and you have a good, giant target. I don't think I've gotten a single Citadel with this AP, but here's a good example of it as we have that permanent fire on the Veneto. So as you can see, a simple slight movement to the left there caused 4 shatters, a few pens. We did get a little bit of damage with that strike. However, as I mentioned earlier, this thing is just, it's nothing more than a gimmick. I hate to be that way. I know some people are just going to be like, oh, well, you just suck, and probably so. However, out of 15 or so games this morning and a pretty abysmal win rate, total damage, and impact on the game, these ships are nothing to write home about. I think it's fun, I think it's new, I think it's interesting, and like I mentioned 2 or 3 times now, I think I'm going to have a much better experience in a couple weeks when I kind of just forget about this thing and then go revisit it later. But as it stands right now, I would definitely not recommend buying this thing out. I would always recommend getting the campaign. It's a new, unique ship, and hopefully when the Dutch line comes, it will give us some practice in order to be better with that line of ships. And here's another good example of just simply moving the stick one way or another to counter these airstrikes. That Veneto turns slightly to the left and causes all of our bombs to miss by a wide margin. You actually might notice that this game is actually a lot closer than I've led to believe, and that the scoreboard will show. We have this Veneto very low and on fire, and because it is a Veneto, I decided to stop shooting. That Italian AP can rip us apart. However, he was shooting HE. I probably should have kept shooting in this moment, but I did want to get another airstrike off, as that is definitely a tactic you can use in these cruisers, is to stop shooting and just simply use your airstrike. However, he makes a wide turn and uses his smoke screen, and as you will see, with most airstrikes are going to happen to this player base, we missed. So yeah, a little bit of a mistake on our part. However, I thought this mines was going to kind of come around this corner here, and especially against a cruiser with medium or, you know, potentially heavy caliber cruiser guns, you will rip this ship apart. I think a mines AP on the side of this thing would absolutely... If, right? If my grandmother had wheels, she would be a bike. So I hope you guys know that meme. But that's going to do it for the narration in this video. I will catch you guys at the end and then go over the stats and commander guide. And again, here's just a good example of kind of what I'm talking about. A slight maneuver at the very end of their drop with not one, but 2 cruisers dropping me results in a near complete miss. So yeah, if you can get AFK Bob on the enemy team, you're going to be having a great time. If not, well, then it's going to be potentially a rough go of it. But again, it's a new ship, something unique, something fun. Just don't expect 200k games right off the bat. But there is the end of that game. 1542 XP in first place there, and just a truly, yeah, an update date team of all time. 97,000 damage with a high caliber and arsonist. Alright guys, let's go ahead and take a look at the stats, commander guide, armor viewer, and modifications of this ship. As always, starting out with the modifications. Aiming system mod 1, you could probably switch this out for AA, especially if you're running in a carrier division. Propulsion. Concealment, I would recommend over steering, but you know, that could switch if you're kind of running a more agile build. And then reload, I thought about adding range, but it's just not enough. I don't know. You could make the argument for either one of these 3, actually. Full AA build might be a little more beneficial, especially in a carrier division, but these are the modifications we were running. Specs, or stats, as they used to call them. Survivability, 33,800 with a 19% torpedo damage reduction. Aircraft, hit points 2,000, 200 knot speed, attack size 6, detectability 9 kilometers, squad restoration 63 seconds, and then max bomb damage 5,800. Multiply that by 6, and that would be your max damage. I've never gotten anything close to that. I think 10 or 11k is my max drop so far. And then your fire setting chance, of course, with that is 33%. Artillery 4x2 152s. The guns are pretty abysmal. Kind of a slow turning 180 turn time there. 5.8 reload, 16.1 range, 11% fire chance. And again, I've yet to get a Citadel. I'm guessing you're going to have to go against a very lightly armored target. AA defense is decent at 90 there. You're kind of looking at your max range, aka your long range AA, which is not the best. However, you do have 200 at 4 kilometers and then 218 with your 40mm Bofors there. So decent AA up close. However, your long range AA is truthfully what you want to be the best. Maneuverability, 36 knot speed there. Kind of a large turning circle. I've gotten caught with that once. And an 8.2 second rudder shift time. Concealment is 9.4, and that's without running Carl Dorman. The concealment in the 4th slot, I think you can get it, or the 2nd slot, you can get it significantly lower. But speaking of, let's go ahead and take a look at Carl. He's got his base trait at stop at any cost, damage against all cruisers, destroyers, and then your shell grouping. We're running Ingenious just to help us know when we're targeted. You are a very light cruiser, so want to preserve as much health and dodge if you can. Full speed ahead to increase that rudder time. Again, here is, look at me now. That will get your concealment. A max concealment build would be 8.8, so potentially kind of meme-worthy. It is something to consider. However, I think 9.4 is enough, especially with, you know, Ingenious and adding that little bit of maneuverability. We are running Velocious here. You could make an argument for this perk as well. A mainly defensive commander, Mr. Karel. Did I say Carl? It's definitely Karel, but whatever. He's Dutch, so we can just make up the pronunciations. Ik val aan vlogmij. See? Just like that, it sounds correct. Each main battery shell, torpedo, or bomb hit by your cruiser resulting in damage increases subsequent damage to the same ship up to 50%. So that could absolutely be toxic for camping, just, you know, backlining battleships sitting in one spot or island humping cruisers. However, getting those follow-up hits, especially if they know you're attacking you and they know what these ships can do, is going to be very difficult. Air support is the new legendary skill. Airstrike cooldown time, reduced 3%, and then the special effect, when an enemy ship is within 8 kilometers of range, every other airstrike cooldown only takes 1 second. So it might be worth it to switch to this concealment and somehow get a smoke screen or something to get within 8 kilometers. However, it's probably not going to work out too often that way. Makawa for added concealment, and then we added Andre Lemanier for that reduced detectability after firing your main guns. So a kind of mainly defensive build that we are running here, but that is, you know, what helped us, or helps us, get our concealment so low is Makawa, as well as potentially adding Look at Me Now. And the last, but certainly not least, the armor viewer. 25mm bow. I was getting punched by a Petro, not sure why, but you can kind of look at this armor profile and see that you're basically a floating tin can with a not big citadel, but a moderate citadel there. A good casemate, so you're going to be taking those chunky penetrations, even from HE from battleships. They're going to hit that and just kind of abuse most of your armor, essentially. And then, of course, you do have a decently sized citadel, so plunging fire is definitely going to be a thing. Like I said, I've avoided getting yeeted a lot, despite kind of pulling out into some questionable situations. However, we did get yeeted once, so definitely has some yeet potential. But that is the D7 Provincian. Pyromania, above average fire setting capabilities. Maybe in combination with the Airstrike, but definitely not the guns. Full circle and then Airstrike. So yeah, a cool looking, fun, new, unique ship. However, I truthfully think the Airstrike perk is just a gimmick. So if you can get it to work against, like I said, AFK or stationary players, then yeah, this thing could be nasty. As it stands right now, if anyone has half of a brain in this game, which is only about 40% of the player base, then they're going to be dodging, and you can dodge as well if you go against this thing. So hope you guys enjoyed that first look. I'll catch you guys maybe soon on stream here, but you guys have a good one. I'm out. Peace.